Have you ever done an exercise which is focused on identifying your why? If you haven't yet, it's something that has come up a lot on this podcast, which should probably clue you in that it's something worth doing. If you're listening to this show, you're probably interested in some pretty advanced concepts and putting forth a lot of effort to understand those concepts. Either real estate's a side hustle of yours, or you're an entrepreneur, a real estate entrepreneur. There are easier ways, I should say less volatile ways, that you can go about your life. So it's really important to ask and answer the questions that are really getting to the bottom of what's going on. So why should you really bother giving that extra 20%? Other than physical possessions and money, what do you really stand to gain or lose by your level of performance? Most importantly, why should you be excited to get out of bed in the morning? These are all really important questions to ask and then contemplate. Our guest today is going to talk a lot about that and more, and he's in a great position to do so. He has become a bit of a legend in the sector of investing and in multifamily. He has an excellent thought leadership platform that has inspired people to really just kick butt at everything they do. In fact, I was on a panel recently with some other real estate podcasters, and we were discussing the ins and outs of the business. And one of the questions was, who was one of your favorite guests you've ever had on your show? And several people mentioned our guest for today. And the reason for this is very clear from this interview. He is just a beacon of positive energy and motivation, but this wasn't always the case. As he's going to discuss in this interview, there's a point where he reached what he considered to be the absolute pinnacle of success. But it turns out it was much more empty than he thought it was going to be. And he'd worked really hard towards this goal of being, quote, financially wealthy. Once he got there, didn't really seem to give him the impact he was anticipating it having after all those years. So we're going to talk about what that realization felt like and how he was able to dig himself out of that. We're going to talk about how he not only gained, but also lost over $20 million. We're going to talk about visualization and some of the strategies which helped him to not only buy things like amazing cars and awesome houses and mansions, but also have a pretty significant impact on the world through philanthropy. And I think my favorite part of this interview is when I asked him what makes him excited to get out of bed at night. And he was answering the question before I even finished asking. His answer is just so cool, and it's something that I really, really am inspired by. So hey, listen, if you're enjoying this content, there's only two things I need you to do, and both are free. So if you like the show, listen to a couple episodes, make sure to subscribe in iTunes and leave a review for the show. This is extremely important for the viability of the program. We track these numbers, and the numbers of subscribers and reviews are absolutely critical for the show's success, especially in terms of attracting high-profile guests onto the program. So like I said, if you've already listened to a few episodes, you like the content, make sure to leave a review in iTunes and smash that subscribe button. That's it. Both are free. It's fun. And it's the way that we ensure that we get to keep providing you with these excellent discussions. All right. I hope you enjoy the episode. How's it going, everyone? Our guest for today is Rod Khleif, who is a passionate real estate investor who has personally owned and managed over 2,000 apartments and homes. As an accomplished entrepreneur, Rod has built several successful multi-million-dollar businesses, which we'll certainly talk about today. However, if you ask Rod what he's most proud of, he will always say that it's his 15 years of community building and philanthropy. Most notably, he founded the Tiny Hands Foundation, which has benefited more than 55,000 children in need. He's basically combined his passion for real estate investing, goal setting, envisioning, manifesting success, and is unquestionably one of the most influential minds in the multifamily successor. He has an awesome podcast that we'll link to in the show notes page. So Rod, thanks again for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure, buddy. This is going to be a lot of fun.
So I got to say that sometimes in preparation for these calls, I look and do some research, try to find some other previous interviews to generate some good questions. And I saw an interview you did with Jason Yarusi, and I was listening to it. I would listen to a little bit, write a question down, listen to a little bit, write a question down. And was just so enthralled by the content. I found out that I had written 7 questions down and I had listened to 6 minutes of the interview. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to pull brakes on this. It's just an awesome interview. So before we even get into all this awesome topics that we're going to talk about today, I just want to back up a bit and learn a little bit about your background. Tell us a bit of your story before you even got into the real estate sector.
Sure. No, I probably go back to, when I immigrated to this country. I was 6 years old and immigrated with my brother, Albert, and my mother's Vancha. And, we ended up in Denver, Colorado, where I lived for 30 years. And we didn't have any money. Literally, I wore clothes from the Goodwill through junior high school. My mom bought expired food, and we drank powdered milk because she thought milk was healthy at that time. And because that's all we could afford. And fast forward to today, I've owned over a couple thousand houses, multiple apartment complexes, but we really struggled growing up. And what got me into real estate was my mom with her, she babysat kids so we'd have enough money to eat. And with her babysitting money, she bought the house across the street from us when I was 14 for approximately $30,000. And when I was 17, about to graduate from high school, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep. And I'm like, I'm getting into real estate. This is absolutely freaking incredible. So, I went out and got my real estate license. Of course, didn't make any money my first couple of years. My first year I made maybe $8,000. My second year, maybe $10,000. But my third year, I made over $100,000. And, so what happened between year 2 and year 3 is I met a guy that taught me about the psychology of success and really how mindset and psychology is 80 to 90% of your success in anything. Only 10 to 20% is the real estate stuff like you talk about on your podcast and I talk about on mine. And so, I really got enthralled by that. And that was really, the tipping point for me was focusing on mindset and to actually take action and push through fear and make it happen. So that's kind of, a real 50,000 foot view on my story. But, it's been a fun ride. I will tell you that in 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And, but there's a punchline. In 2008, I crashed and burned. And we can dig into that if you like, because I enjoy talking about the mindset it took to come back from that. I lost $50 million in 2008. It was my biggest seminar ever. And we can speak to why that happened and why I started my podcast and really the investing criteria that we use now, because of that experience and just how conservative we are in our investments.
Sure.
So happy to get into all that if you like.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great portion, and I think it's definitely important to touch on. I mean, before we even get into kind of the downfall there, what was taking place? What were you investing in, excuse me, when you did start, building that portfolio?
Yeah, sure. I bought 2,000 houses, one by one from different owners and multiple apartment complexes in 3 states. So it started in Denver, had 500 houses in Denver and several apartments there, and then ended up in Memphis. I consider that a seminar as well, actually. I bought a couple of hundred properties in Memphis and then ended up buying, approximately 1,300 in Florida. Well, in 2008, I had 800 houses and I had several apartment complexes. And the reason that what happened for me was I was primarily in the houses. That was the bulk of my portfolio. And my houses were 2 hours in one direction and 2 hours in the other direction along the coast of Florida, the Gulf Coast. And so let me give you some of the issues that popped up as a result of that. One was, in many of the properties were in flood zones or wind zones, so the insurance was much higher. Florida has no state income tax, so the property taxes are one of the ways they supplement that deficiency, and so property taxes here are much higher. But the big thing that killed me is most of my portfolio was C-class houses. And so my tenants were primarily construction. They were in retail. They were all in industries that got devastated when '08 happened, when the crash happened. So couple that with the logistics of managing a portfolio that's that spread out. For example, in my apartment complexes, if I had a maintenance issue pop up, then all I would do is send a maintenance guy and we'd have stockpiled plumbing parts, stockpiled HVAC parts, appliance parts, because everything was the same. So they could go in and, send him there and in an hour he could be in and out, fixed. Well, if they had to go to a house like an hour north of me or an hour south of me, then they'd have to go assess what was wrong, then go find a Home Depot or a Lowe's and go buy the parts. Maybe that's another hour. So an hour to drive there, hour to go get parts. They come back and you know how invariably they'll get into something and they'll realize they need something else. So they have got to go back to the hardware store or the building supply store. And what takes an hour at an apartment complex takes all day at a house. And you multiply that times 800 and then, the massive turnover and vacancy that happened because everybody was out of work. My client base, it was just it was the perfect storm. So that's where I crashed and burned in '08. But, what was interesting was throughout all that, my multifamily did just fine. It was the houses that pulled me down, and the apartment complexes were doing great. Yeah, they had a little pullback, but they would have easily survived. My mistake was I cross-collateralized them with packages of houses. So the whole thing went down.
Right.
And so if you'd like, we can speak to the mindset and psychology it took for me to come back from that to the success that I enjoy today. Happy to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into it because it's definitely important. But I think before we even jump ahead, because that's obviously where I'd like to take the conversation, I want to know how that was able to be overcome. But, in these interviews, and I've interviewed a lot of commercial real estate experts on this topic, and you hear this term, the lack of scalability of single family. That is what they're referring to, what you just outlined,
right,
for the listeners at home. They're talking about the systems in place are cumbersome so that overcoming adversity, overcoming small challenges, you don't get the economies of scale. You don't get those systems. You don't get those, you're having to do the same task a million times as opposed to one time. And that one task may even take longer than it should because of something like driving around. And it's all fine and well if the economy's booming and the capital markets are loose and everything's going your way, but you don't know how different it can be from a scalability system until you have that clear A/B test, which you did inadvertently in 2008 when you said, wow, one of these is actually a fully functioning business and the other is basically an investment that I didn't really build systems around. Is that kind of a fair summary?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly it's a little more than that. But the bottom line was, every one of my houses was different. The appliances were different. The systems inside were different. The HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, the appliance, everything was different. So there's no way to get those economies of scale like you described. And so you're right. And when the capital markets dried up, and then I had the vacancy issues, really the real issue was I wasn't focused on cash flow. Now, if I had just been focused on cash flow, there wouldn't have been an issue. I was focused on value. Like I have students now that call me and they'll say, well, I found this deal that, sold for $3 million, 5 years ago, and I can get it for $2 million. And I tell them, it just doesn't matter. It's all about the numbers now. It's all about cash flow. In fact, I wrote a book about this. I'll give it to your listeners for free. The subtitle is The New Rules of Real Estate Investing, i.e. the new rules being focus on cash flow instead of value. The title is, how to create lifetime cash flow. And it's 200 pages. It's like a textbook for this business. So if your listeners want it, they can just text my name, Rod, 41411, and we'll give them a free copy. It's going to go on Amazon here in May for $25, but they can have it for free. Awesome.
I'll link that in the show notes page.
Awesome.
So just going to the seminar that you mentioned, when things really start to turn around functionally, you have those systems that you're describing as being challenging. What actually caused the problem? So was it loans coming due at the wrong time? Was it an interest rate spike, or what was really
No, it was cash flow. I mean, it was just, I was already tight because of the things I described.
Yeah.
The logistical issues, the costs of maintenance, costs of turnover were higher as well. And then you couple that with taxes, insurance, all of those things. And then when vacancy increased, that was the end of it. And so, it was a painful process. I'm back now. My credit's finally back and it's perfect. And we've got 1,000 doors under contract right now. We're taking big deals down. So it's everything's great. And as a result of that, like anytime you get your butt kicked by something, you learn. And I call them seminars. That was a $50 million seminar. But, as a result of that, I'm incredibly conservative in my investments now. We stress test deals out the yin yang and what happens if the property's 35% vacant? Are we okay? And, that's the level we take things. How big is our operating capital reserve in the event of a rainy day, our rainy day fund, things of that nature. So I'm ultra conservative now, and that serves me. But it was painful to go through. So,
well, yeah, let's dive into that. I mean, look, I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that come on this show and say, I've been in the business for 30 years. We only lost principal during one period of those 30 years, which was in 2008. And people start to hear that, and it starts to be something that people are more familiar with. It is what it is. Yeah. And they kind of gloss over it. So if you're relatively new to the business, let's say, for example, if you've only been in this business for the last 10 years, that's just something you're used to hearing. But living through that is something very different than hearing it on a podcast. I'm sure there was some...
And there are a lot of syndicators that haven't gone through it. I mean, we're seeing some stuff out there, guys that are pulling money together that have not gone through, they think it's always going to be golden, and they're not. I mean, I watched somebody's presentation the other day, and we asked the question, what'd you do to stress test? Oh, well, we blah, blah, they didn't stress test it at all.
Right.
And so, I mean, when there's a hiccup, and there's so many of these syndicators out there that are doing a lot of bridge debt right now, and they're not stress testing an exit cap rate. And, what happens if the cap rates go up? They're going to go up. When that happens, values go down. And I will tell you, you want the definition of a bad day. This is a little off topic, but not really. A bad day is having a cash flowing asset that you've got debt that's come due on, let's say bridge debt or something, and you can't refinance because the values have gone down, but it's cash flowing. That's the definition of a bad day in the dictionary. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing irrational exuberance, and it's crazy. I'm really kind of shocked that we have as much under contract as we do right now, and they're solid deals. But there are a lot of guys out there that are new to this business and relatively new. I mean, they could be 5, 6, 7 years, like you said, but because they've only seen the golden stuff, I think there's going to be some pain. I think there's going to be some of these guys that have hiccups and that they can't recover from. But
Agreed. And I mean, one of the things, the benefits of, I started the business in the heart of the recession, 2011.
Wow.
And so I got a little bit of a taste of that because I got to see what it was like at those meetings. Mm-hmm. And so while I didn't have to live through it, and living through it is a completely categorical difference in terms of the knowledge, but seeing the way those meetings were held, I did learn from that experience. And my entire investment thesis was built on the people that were able to survive that, because that was who my network was consisted of, because that's just who were at those meetings. But I want to touch on this because this is something that, like I was saying, that is like it can be very traumatizing in no uncertain terms. You said you built up a portfolio of $50 million. That's basically like your art.
Oh, buddy, I was hiding under a rock. I thought I was set for life. 80 million baby boomers getting old and getting cold. I thought Florida was recession proof. That was my line I gave investors, and I believed it. I still believe it. But I was just a little off on the timing. I mean, who knew that Florida was going to be ground zero? Florida, California, Nevada for that correction. But, bottom line is.
So how did you overcome that?
I was under a rock. Well, I overcome it. And what I'll do, let me share this with your listeners, because I do this at my live events and I do this with my coaching students. But how I overcame it was remembering what I wanted and why I wanted it. So if you'll humor me, let me share a little goal setting workshop. I can do it in just a few minutes to share this with your listeners that if you guys are listening, I think it'll add a ton of value to you. It's a little different than what you might be used to. Would you like me to share it with your listeners?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
All right. Awesome. So basically what I suggest you do is you pick an hour when you have uninterrupted and you're high energy. Don't do it right after a meal. Make sure you're well hydrated, and sit down and write down everything you could ever possibly want in life. Okay. So the big things, all the stuff, the cars, the jet skis, the boats, the planes, the motorcycles, all the stuff, write that down. How much money do you want in the bank? How much ultimately, and maybe how much do you want in a couple years? How much money do you want as far as passive income in a few years, and then ultimately in your lifetime? But so write down all the stuff. And if you're analytical, as I know a lot of your listeners are, don't analyze it. Just keep writing and don't stop. You can scratch it out later, but keep writing and keep that momentum of all the things you could ever possibly want. And remember to take the lid off your brain. It's so important because so many of us are limited by our own belief systems, and we have this box that we operate in. And, I truly believe people make financially, they make the money they must make. And so expand those boundaries and just, take the lid off your brain. And I'll tell you, most people spend more time planning a birthday or Christmas than they do designing their lives. So this process is really part of your life design. So write down everything you could want, then write down all the big things, the little things. Don't be afraid to put big stuff down. If you want a jet, put that down. You want a yacht, put that down. Just it's not outside the realm of reality. I will tell you, when I lived in Denver, I always knew I wanted to live on the beach, and there's no beach in Denver. For 20 years, I dreamt it, and I thought about it, and I ended up with this $8 million house that I built on the beach, and it was a Gulf to Bay, so it was a slice through an island. I had the beach on one side and I had my boat houses on the backside. This place was magnificent, 10,000 square feet, but it was unimaginable when I was 18. But I decided that I wanted it, and that's how it came about. So take the lid off your brain, write down everything you could want, then take it a little further. write down everything you want to learn in life as well.
I like that.
See, me, I want to learn how to fly a helicopter. I want to learn how to play the drums. What do you want to learn? My wife bought me a drum set, a while back, and I still don't know what end of the stick to use. It's over in one of my other buildings here in my compound. But, what do you want to learn? Then also write down who you want to help. And this is really important. Who's relying on you? First of all, your family, but who do you want to help? Me, I bought my parents a house. I took them on a cruise a couple of times. Who do you want to do something for? My bucket list, I still want to pay my brother's houses off. That's still on my bucket list. So again, write down who you want to help. Maybe you want to do something for the community, but whatever it is, write it down. Then once you can't think of another thing, it's not real until it's measurable. And by the way, every one of these goals should be clear and measurable, number one. And when I say measurable, you can't say, I'm going to lose some weight. It's got to be, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by January 1st and feel great about it. Okay, so measurable. Now, the next thing you want to do is put a time limit on each goal. That's the other way you measure it. So look at each goal that you wrote down and put how many years it's going to take you to achieve it. Put a 1, a 3, a 5, a 10, or even a 20. Remembering that as human beings, we will overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and massively underestimate what we can do in 10 or 20 years, like the house example I gave you that I did. So keep that in mind as you're putting time limits on your goals. So put a number by each goal. Then after you're done with that, I want you to pick your number one goal, the juiciest goal, that if you got that, it would be like, oh my God, that's so freaking amazing. I accomplished this. And if you've got 3 or 4 that are equally exciting, just pick one. It won't matter for what we're going to do next. So pick your number one goal. Then pick 3 of your top 1-year goals. Put all 4 of those on a separate sheet of paper. Now, this is where most people stop. Well, in fact, most people never even get this far, but now we're going to talk about, by the way, all of this that we're doing here, this is the fuel. This is the fuel to get you to take action on your dreams, to get you to, push through any fear that you have, any limiting beliefs that you have, to actually take action. Frankly, to get outside of comfort. So many people are comfortable, so they don't take action to take their life to the next level. This is the fuel. So you got the goals, you got your 4 goals picked out. Now I want you to write a paragraph for each one of those goals, why it's an absolute must to achieve that goal. Okay? And use emotionally charged words like incredible, amazing, so I can show my wife what an amazing life looks like, or my husband, so that we can do whatever we want, whenever we want, go wherever we want, bring whoever we want, whatever it is for you. Make it powerful, because words are so powerful. So use emotionally charged words to write down why it's an absolute must. So I can show my kids what success looks like. So I can show my spouse what success looks like. So we can have freedom. So again, think outside the box, write down for each one at least a couple of sentences why it's an absolute must. But then take it one step further, because as human beings, we will do more to avoid pain than gain pleasure. Put some pain in there. So write down what will happen if you don't achieve those goals, and make it painful. So I'm not a failure. So I don't fail my wife or husband. So I don't live a life of regret, so that, I don't fail my children. Make it painful. Because again, we'll do more to avoid that pain than gain pleasure. And this is the fuel, my friends. This is how I picked myself up after I lost $50 million. Now, let me share one other thing with you that's really very interesting. And that is to incorporate visualization in this. And I didn't realize I was doing this until I looked back on it. And really until actually I saw the movie, The Secret, maybe some of you have heard of, but about the law of attraction. But what I did when I was 18, I bought a 4-door Ford Granada, okay? And this is the ugliest damn car you've ever seen in your life. And but I bought it because I thought of, as a real estate broker, I was a real estate broker. I got my broker's license when I turned 18. You could do it back then with education. You didn't need experience. And so I was a broker. So I bought this 4-door car, and I worked with a guy that had a Corvette, and he let me drive it. And that's a key piece, that experiential piece. Anything that you want, try to experience as much of it as you can. Go test drive the car. If there's a house you want, or like a house, go see an open house of a house like what you want. I mean, do everything you can to experience as much of it as you can. So when I drove that Corvette, I'm like, man, I got to have this. So this is way before the internet. I mean, this is literally back in 81. And so I got a picture of a Corvette out of a magazine. and I taped it to the visor of that four-door Granada. Within a year, I had a beautiful Corvette. I'm going to give you a couple more examples. But let me say this before I give you these examples. This is not me bragging, because this stuff I'm going to show you as an example doesn't even interest me anymore, but it's very good for inspirational purposes and for illustrative purposes. So it's all I can do is share my story. So the next example is another car example. So this is back at the time when the TV show Magnum PI was playing. The actor's name was Tom Selleck. He drove this gorgeous red Ferrari 308. And I saw that car and I'm like, man, I got to have that. And so I got a picture of that actual car and put it on the visor in my Corvette and looked at it when I got in the Corvette. And then within a couple of years, I had a Maserati look just like it. I'll give you one more example. I'm the guy that always wanted a Lamborghini. Okay. Back in the day, Mike Tyson and his bride for a day, Robin Givens, he bought matching Lamborghinis. I had pictures of that. I had the posters on the wall with the girls in the bikinis and the car wash and all of that. And what's interesting though, is my son collected model cars, of exotic cars. He had about 30 of them. And he had a model of the exact same color and style Lamborghini that I ended up buying. And he used to tell me, he used to visualize me taking him to school in it. He'd imagine that, ultimately wrecked it, but we won't get into that. But the bottom line is visualization works. And so, don't underestimate getting pictures. Once you've done your goals, go on Google and search for pictures that resonate with you associated with those goals. They don't have to be exactly what the goal is, but when you look at them, you're like, man, that looks good. It feels good. I want, it stir you. Download them, go to CVS or Walgreens, have them blown up and put them on the wall. I will tell you, like on my wall here, I've got pictures of the things that I have blown up that I want now. And I'll tell you another example. I've got a planner that I use. I'm a dinosaur and I use a paper planner. And in the back of this thing, I've got pictures that have been in here for 20 years. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. And the first pictures are my gratitude pictures. Because everything starts from a place of gratitude. So they're pictures of my kids when they were young. And again, I've had these, they're covered in plastic. I've had them in my planners for 20 years. I've gone through probably 4 planners over the 20 years or 5, but the pictures have been moved from one to the next. Then I've got pictures of the houses that I've wanted. And what's astounding is you look at these pictures and they look just like that house that I built on the beach, or that, like, I live in a compound now. I live in an incredible compound, 6 buildings. I've got a giant main house. I've got a 2-bedroom guest house on the water. I've got a media building with a theater room, and above it is a conference center that I work out of, and and a beautiful exercise room. What's crazy is these pictures look like it. Okay. And I didn't plan that. It just how it works. The universe works. And then stupid stuff I don't care about. Like I've got a few $100,000 worth of watches, the Lamborghini. I got pictures of Lamborghini before I ever got it. The Rolls Royce, all this stuff that I got because I had pictures. So do not underestimate the power of this, my friends. I know you analytical ones, I may have lost you now, but trust me, you'd be making a mistake if you didn't utilize this. Very, very powerful. So get pictures of those goals. And that's it. That's how
that's it.
It works. That's how I did it. I have this beautiful compound and it's gorgeous like a park. And because God's got a sense of humor, I can see my old house across the bay there that I lost back in the day. So anyway,
wow.
But life is good.
Man, Rod, so I got to be honest with you. First of all, thank you very much for sharing that, especially going to that level of detail. I want to circle back on a lot of those things. Before I even do that, though, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, I've listened to a lot of your interviews, but I didn't quite understand, because it's usually not you doing the talking. I mean, we had a conversation. I was lucky enough to be on your show, which, by the way, thank you again for that. I was talking about self-storage, which is something that I have a lot of background in, and I know that your focus has been on multifamily. By the way you ask questions, you could tell your knowledge of the real estate sector is extremely extensive and very deep.
Thank you.
And it's fascinating when you uncover, it is so clear to me that real estate is simply the vehicle by which you're able to accomplish your goals. Like your real focus, what really motivates you is kind of what you just outlined.
Yes.
Is
the vehicle is irrelevant.
Yes.
It's your mindset. So guys listening, trust me on this. Please believe me on this. Okay. And in fact, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me give you a couple more examples, Hunter, because they're really relevant.
I'm not going to stop you.
Forget my examples. Jim Carrey, when he was flat broke, wrote himself a check for $10 million. That's how much he made for his first big movie, Dumb and Dumber. Okay. There was this New Orleans millionaire that I love quoting, and he adopted this classroom into school. And at this school, only about 17% of the Oh, by the way, back to the Jim Carrey thing. He used to sit and stare at that check when he was broke, and he'd visualize cashing it. Okay.
He's talked about it on Oprah, by the way. Google Jim Carrey, Oprah, $10 million. You'll pull it up. It's insane.
Yeah, there you go. It's a beautiful story. He buried the check with his dad because his dad believed in his dream. But the New Orleans Millionaire adopted this school, and this was a school where don't quote me on the exact numbers, but they're about like this. Maybe 15, 16, 70% of the kids went to college. Okay. All he did was he took that class, one of those classes, he put them in a bus and he took them to a college. For one day. They spent one day at a college. They paired them up with a college student. They got to see the campus. They got to go eat in the cafeteria. They got to go to classes, walk around the campus. And that was it. One day. Then they took them back. And all they did for the next 3 years was every day they would close their eyes for 5 minutes in school and visualize themselves going to college. Over 80% went to college. That's the power of visualization. So don't take my word for it. And I'll give you one awesome example that I love hearing and reading about. When Epcot Center was built, Walt Disney had already died. And a reporter went up to Roy Disney and said, it's a shame Walt didn't get to see this. And Roy looked at him and said, the only reason you're seeing this is because Walt saw this. So again, do not underestimate the power of visualization.
You have to do it.
Sorry I interrupted you, Hunter. I just realized
this is great content. This is something that I've talked about a lot on the show. We've had guests come and talk about it. I think that familiarizing yourself, especially with your stretch goals, if you have lofty goals, in order to familiarize yourself with that, in order for your brain to accept that this is reality, you have to write them down. You have to see them. You have to witness them. And the more senses that you can incorporate into this, example is the photos, the more likely it is going to be that it's going to be achieved. Of course, they need to be SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, if you have all of those working at the same time and you have a visualization component, it is remarkable what you can accomplish on a quarter-by-quarter basis.
Yeah.
So that's actually something I want to talk about as well. So you've done a lot of work towards facilitating other people accomplish their goals. And I know that you've done some coaching as well. I wanted to know what the major hurdles are that you find people hitting that makes it challenging for them to get to the next level.
Sure. No, in fact, you come to one of my boot camps. I've got a boot camp coming up in May in Denver, and tickets are like ridiculously stupid cheap, like $200 for 3 days. And it's just me for 3 days. I don't bring outside speakers in to sell things. But one of the big pieces of what I do is this mindset stuff. It's drinking through a fire hose in the multifamily, of course. Everybody's eyes are crossed when they leave. But I focus on, of course, the goal setting. That's critical. You got to know what it is and that you want, and more importantly, why you want it. But then I also dig into limiting beliefs. So many people have limiting belief systems, and there's a reason that belief systems, the acronym is BS, because most of the time they are BS, okay? They have no basis in fact, but because as an adolescent or a child, you had an emotional experience, and that emotional component in your brain, you might think it's factual. And so people have, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of humiliation, fear of success. And so we push through that at my events. That's one of the things we work on is limiting beliefs. And then the other thing is recognizing the power of your identity. That's another component at my boot camps that I spend a little bit of time on, because there's no greater force in the human psyche than the need to remain consistent with how we identify ourselves. So if you say, I'm a great father, you will fight over that if somebody questions that, okay? And so on my wall here, I've got, I am a business genius. And again, that's not ego. That's what I want to aspire to be. I am an amazing husband. I'm the best in the world at what I do. So I've got these I am statements around me on my wall here. If we were videoing, I could show them to you. And I've got them in my exercise room. And sometimes I yell this stuff at the top of my lungs. I do these affirmations and I say these I am statements on whatever it is I want to embody. And I yell it with total intensity. It gets into the fiber of your being and you start owning it. You start adopting it. And I can't tell you how powerful this stuff is. So my real estate boot camps are not like your typical boring real estate boot camps, but we have a lot of fun. Anyway, I digress, but there you go.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I do like incorporating that physical component, just to give yourself a little bit of a motivation. I've talked about this on the show before. I was asked to speak with some pretty heavy hitters intellectually, including Peter Schiff, Doug Casey, Gene Epstein, guys I respect a lot, economists, etc. And very rarely do I get stage fright, but I actually had this moment where I really did need, to have that affirmation. And I excused myself and went outside into the hallway and had to be basically explained to myself why I was in the position in the first place. Like, this is cool. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to say some cool things that are going to be a combination of funny and educational. And I really needed it. If I hadn't done it, I was not in a good spot, and ended up going very well. And I made a joke about some ridiculous, obscure economics thing, and Gene Epstein laughed. And so that's the best I could get out of the whole.
Oh, I love it. What a great example. I'll tell you, there have been times, when I was hiding under a freaking rock, losing it all, I thought I was set for life, man. 800 plus properties in Florida, beautiful. You thought it was recession proof. I thought I was set for life. And when I was going through that pain and that fear, I used to run down the street yelling, I am courage. I am courage. I'd emphasize different words. I am courage. I am courage. And I just get it into my body. And then, then I knew I needed to focus. So as I am focused, and I would just be doing this. And I know we probably lost half your audience, you analytical guys listening, but I'm telling you guys, ignore this at your peril, because this stuff works. Okay. That's how I was able to recover from losing $50 million to back where I'm at right now. And,
well, think about it on a risk adjusted basis. What is the worst you can lose by running around screaming, I am courage?
Nothing.
Maybe your neighbors think you're not that cool.
Well, they'll think you're crazy. That's okay.
Yeah, but other than that,
I've got an exercise room now, so I can do it privately. But I used to do it down the street, man.
The only reason you got the exercise room is because you're able to scream that enough times and believe it, and to get there. So we could talk about this indefinitely. But one of the things that you mentioned in your bio that is really important for this entire conversation. By the way, before we even segue to that, there's a book called Laws of Lifetime Growth, written by someone named Dan Sullivan.
Oh, I love Dan
what
Sullivan.
You were touching on earlier, okay, good. You're familiar with him. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything that you outlined is basically the way to be, 156 years old. Because if you can constantly be focusing on what you want to learn, what you want to earn, and why you want to do it, why would you not want to live one more year, basically? It's like a perpetual thing. Most people, like a lot of people that end up dying, they end up dying because they don't focus on those short-term and long-term goals. So I just wanted to mention that.
Right.
There's a lot of overlap.
Let me share something with you. In fact, I'm really glad you said that, because let me share something with you, really important as it relates to goals. So I told you I built that beautiful house on the beach, okay? 10,000 square foot, testament to my ego, which is really what it was. It was to show the world I was good enough. And back then I was totally focused on Rod. It's Rod. It was just all about me and proving to the world that I mattered, and that's why that whole, limiting beliefs and belief systems resonated with me, because it was me. I used to I asked myself the question, how can I show them I'm good enough? That was a subconscious thing that I was doing. So I built this magnificent home. I mean, amazing home. One day, about 2 months after I built it, I'm floating in the pool, and there's a waterfall from the second floor in the pool. I bought these expensive trees that kind of branched out over the pool, palm trees, another waterfall from the spa. I mean, this house had big spiral staircase up through the middle, $150,000 fish tank on the second floor. I could go on and on. I mean, wine cellar. I mean, magnificent home. So I'm floating in the pool at night. It's changing colors because it's got fiber optic lighting. My family's inside sleeping, warm water. And I get depressed. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I've just achieved incredible success by societal standards, and I'm depressed. 2 months after I achieved this incredible goal I worked my whole life to achieve. And I'm like, what is going on? What I realized, and that's what you just said triggered to remind me to say this, is there's a big difference between success and fulfillment. I learned about this from Tony Robbins. I spent 20 years following him around the planet. He calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Now, I had achieved, but I wasn't fulfilled. And I've interviewed people on my show in the billionaire range that it's the same dynamic. I could just tell when I interviewed them that they're successful, but they're not happy. And so what I realized when I look back on it, and that's why I want to share it with your listeners as it relates to goals, is you should never achieve a big goal without having other goals lined up behind it. So that was one of the things, because like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. You have to have a vision for the future. When Tony does his events, he brings people on stage and he always asks who's suicidal, and he always fixes a suicidal person. It's just amazing to watch live. If you ever had a chance to see him, just see him. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. But when you dig into somebody that's suicidal, they always don't have a vision for the future. That's why it's so important to have a vision for the future. So that was one thing that was going on back when I was depressed. I didn't have a vision. I didn't know what to do next. So I bought some books and, Dale Carnegie, Zig Ziglar, and I bought a Tony book. And again, this was, 19 years ago approximately, or maybe, So, and I was so blown away by the book. I went and saw Tony live, and I saw that he fed families for the holidays. And I had been totally focused on Rod. And I thought, man, this is really cool. He's fed millions now, I think tens of millions. And I decided to feed 5 families that year. And the third family changed my life. I bought this is for Thanksgiving, and I bought turkeys and baskets of food, and we delivered the food to the families. I found out from a church who really needed help. And third family I went to was this lady living in this shack with 5 kids. Her husband had left. She came out, she saw the box of food and the turkey and started crying. Her kids came out, some of them started crying. I started crying, and I was hooked. And I'm blessed to say that over the last, 18 years or so, we've fed now 65,000 children. The bio was out of date. We've fed 55,000 children for the holidays with baskets of food. I do it for Christmas now. I've done over 10,000 backpacks filled with school supplies to local kids. It's just a travesty that there are kids in this country that don't have the basic school supplies. And then over 10,000 teddy bears to local police departments for officers to keep in their cars when they encounter a child that's been traumatized. And the reason I bring this up is I know if you're listening, you want financial success. Success without that component, without giving back beyond yourself, without fulfillment is not success. So make sure that you incorporate giving back in some fashion. You don't have to do anything as grandiose as I did, but make sure that you're doing it. And so I just want to leave your listeners with that. It's so important because truly it's not success if you're not fulfilled.
Yeah. And that's really the missing link, what I was talking about earlier, those laws of lifetime growth. It's giving a way to give back, because I have heard it repeated over and over again that is the element which slowly, as you do become more and more financially well off, that is the component that becomes more and more important, in the sense that every dollar you get is less and less consequential, but every dollar you can give then it becomes the 10x inverts, basically. It used to be that all you needed was the money, and now it's like all I want to do is give the money away, or whatever resources it is, whether it's your time or whatever. Different people have different ways. It's something that I haven't touched on enough on the program, but I really do think that it's not that everyone that comes on the show that's talking about is just misleading the listeners. It's really, really critical in terms of taking to the next level. And the earlier you can get started, the better, because you mentioned, helping 5 families. Everyone listening to this podcast can do that 100%. Sure.
They can do it right now, or they can help an elderly person. You don't have to do anything big. Just do something, give back in some way. And so, it's just, again, you may not think it's important. I will tell you it's critical, because what you give, you get. So whatever you give, you want love, give love. You want happiness, give happiness. You want money, give time and money, give back. I started my podcast. We're at over 5 million downloads, and I've just been adding value, trying to add value. And it's turned into this incredible machine. I've people sending us great deals. And like I say, we're raising money for 1,000 doors right now. If any of your listeners, aren't interested in self-storage and they're interested in multifamily, please reach out to us. Text partner to 41411 and we'll get you on our calendar and we'll chat with you about it. But the point is, I got all that because I gave beyond myself. Yeah. And that's just how the universe works. Frankly, anything in this universe that doesn't contribute gets eliminated. That's how harsh it is. Anything, if you think about it, contributes in some fashion to the planet, it gets eliminated. And same thing for human beings. We are put on this earth to contribute. It's a basic human need. So, and my friends, you've heard it in church or wherever. What you give, you get back. You get it back tenfold, 100-fold. So whatever it is you want, give it.
Man, a lot of power in that. I really like, you want time? Give it. Because that's the one thing that people get stuck on, particularly. I don't have enough time for this. I get whatever. Yeah. Well, that's the route. So look, to be honest with you, I have like 100 more questions that I don't know that we're going to get into, because I want to also talk about multifamily and your investment thesis and all that. So I got one more question for you focused on the motivation side of things. And you got to come on in 3 months and we'll do it again. And we'll do exclusively the engineer brain. And so all the analysts can stick around this time.
Oh, love it. Love it. Yeah. Yeah. That's what everybody was listening for anyway.
I don't know. I do a lot of motivational stuff or psychological stuff as well. So let me ask one more psychological question. Sure. What is the thing that right now you're most excited about in terms of when you jump out of bed, if you could get an email or however you could get the correspondence?
That's so easy. That's so easy, brother. That's so easy. I've got a wall behind me covered with hundreds of thank you cards, from people that took action on their dreams and either invested with us or bought a property on their own, took action, got uncomfortable and started building that magnificent life of their dreams. And that's my greatest gift, buddy. I get a card or an email or a text or a PM on Facebook almost every single day. In fact, pretty much at least once a day from somebody with gratitude towards what I've done, you know, with my podcast or through my live events, or, you know, I've got coaching students, we've got coaching, and it's just my greatest gift, because when you see that, I'm looking at my wall behind me, I've got pictures of people send me their babies and the properties they bought. And I mean, I'm sure that's why you do it too, brother. I mean,
I got to tell you,
better than that.
As soon as you answered that question, when you said, I know exactly the answer, and you laid it out, as soon as I understood what you were saying, I made a face, which is not caught on audio. I made a face that was like, if you heard like the nastiest music note you ever heard, just ooh, like it hit me like a nice jazz note. I was like, that is music to my ears. So that is awesome. I'm glad I asked that question, because that's super powerful.
Well, it's the truth. I mean, it really is the truth. I mean, it's not about the money. God, come see where I live. I don't need the money. I love what I'm doing. I freaking love it. And to add value to people and get these young guys that are just getting started and get their first property, or they get up to 1,000 doors. And, you know, I've got students that have done that. It's just so freaking rewarding. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Life is good, brother.
Yeah, I hear it. And I could tell by your voice, and this is something that I've started saying recently when I meet people, that it's clear that if they had 3 more zeros in the bank account, they'd be doing the exact same thing. That is the type of people that I like to work with. Yeah.
Let me add one last thing while I'm thinking about it real fast before we cut off. It's motivational related. You know, I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast. Awesome. Shout out to him. You know, he interviews world-class performers. And one thing I noticed that was really interesting, you know, he's got billionaires, he's got movie stars, he's got CEOs. Almost all of them have a morning ritual. So let me take 1 minute and share mine, because it's so simple and fast. Just every morning, do something to set your day off right. Like what I'll do is I'll just think about what I'm grateful for. I'll think about my amazing, beautiful wife, my kids, my coaching students, my foundation, anything that I'm truly grateful for. And literally I can do this in bed, or I've got a chair behind me with vision boards. And then what I'll do after I think about what I'm grateful for, I'll think about what I want in life, my goals now, as if I already have them, with gratitude. I'll even get emotional sometimes. That's a depth of gratitude I'll bring to the things that I want in life. And literally all of this can take 3 or 4 minutes. And then I make a declaration to myself that it's going to be an awesome day. And it usually is. So I just wanted to share that last little tip.
Awesome. Well, Rod, before I let you go, let the listeners know how they can learn more about you, your book. You mentioned that link.
Buddy. Yeah, so the free book, it's like a no-brainer. It's like a textbook. It's not a fluffy piece that a lot of thought leaders throw out there. It's like a textbook for multifamily. It's just text ROD to 41411. If you're an investor and like to talk to about, you know, we've got, like I say, about 1,000 doors under contract right now, solid deals. And I train my investors through the syndication process, so they're getting a behind-the-scenes look, stuff I can't possibly think to remember in my 3-day live events. So just text the word partner to 41411, and we'll get you that. And then, you know, if you can come see me in Denver, I'm in Denver May 17th, 18th, and 19th, 3 days, rodindenver.com. Like I said, tickets are ridiculously cheap. And Denver is United's hub, so you can fly there nonstop, real cheap anyway. And then I've got a ton of free content. I just found out my YouTube videos were watched 30,000 hours last year. I was blown away by that. But my website is rodkhleif.com. And all of this stuff is there as well. Rod, KHLEIF as in Frank.com. Hunter, thanks so much, brother. I had a lot of fun. You know, like Dale Carnegie says in How to Win Friends and Influence People, whenever you let somebody talk about themselves, it's the greatest conversation they ever had. So I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, Rod. Well, thanks again. And we'll have you on in a couple of weeks just to discuss the multifamily stuff.
Awesome, brother. Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, listeners, thanks for checking out the episode. As always, the contact information for our guest will be available in the show notes page, which is hosted on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Don't forget, if you want access to some of the free goodies that I'm talking about at the beginning of these episodes, like free ebooks, weekly investor emails, and articles about some of the most important investment-related topics, make sure that you have created an account with CFC, because this stuff is automatically available. You can do this by going to cashflowconnections.com and signing up as an accredited investor. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hunterthompson@cashflowconnections.com. Thanks again.